The OKC Thunder were pushed to their brink in a 7-game series against the remnants of the 2023 Denver Nuggets. Meanwhile, the Timberwolves dominated their first-round series versus LA despite them not being the favorites, and they also handled a hobbled Warriors team rather easily. With 2 of the 3 teams that were widely considered the best going into this playoffs being eliminated, OKC is the lone 60-plus win team left in the NBA playoffs. They again enter this series as the favorites, but the Wolves are hungry, and they're not going to go down without a fight. Hello everybody, welcome to Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel and drop a like on this video, and check us out over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you would like to enjoy these as an audio-only experience. However, this is going to have some film breakdown in it, so maybe skip the audio only this time. I also want to promote I am going to be doing a live streamed watch party for probably game 2 of this series. I might still make it for game 1, but I'm recording this video way later than I wanted to, so we're not sure of the scheduling of it all, but I'm going to be joined by the fellas from Nerd Sesh, Carson Breber and Logan Camden. After the game is over, I will be joining their live stream as well for some post-game thoughts, but yeah, more on that later. There will be details in the pinned comment and such going forward. But also, I do need to say forgive me because I am going to be looking down more than usual because, again, late getting this video out and this script is 5,000 words. So I need to be really efficient with how I'm recording this. With that said, I like to start these videos by doing a brief history of the previous playoff matchups between the 2 teams. However, this time around, at least since the Thunder have moved to Oklahoma, these teams have no playoff history. The Seattle Supersonics beat the Timberwolves 3-2 in round 1 in 1998, but I don't really consider the Sonics and Thunder to be the same team, just the same franchise, and spiritually and identity-wise, just completely different. For what it's worth, Seattle did win off of an amazing Gary Payton series. He averaged 26, 6, and 2 steals on 50, 44, 89 splits, and Minnesota had a more egalitarian approach with 5 starters averaging between 13.8 and 16.2. This was a young Wolves team with KG and Marbury versus an old Sonics team without Sean Kemp. The experience ended up winning in this particular case, but like I said, the Sonics ain't the Thunder, and this means that we have an unprecedented series. Out east, we have a matchup that is rich with history, and out west, something completely brand new. I like the variety. Now, first of all, I watched 2 games for this video, although most of the clips are from the first one. I did this because Julius Randle unfortunately only played 1 game against OKC, and that was in late December, aka at the very tail end of the early struggles that he had before the Wolves started winning every damn game that Julius Randle played. So I watched that December 31st matchup as well as their February 24th matchup because I like to get games that are closer to the end of the season. So unfortunately with that one, not only was there no Julius Randle, but there was also no Rudy Gobert, and Chet was out for both of these games, rather unfortunately. He only played 1 against Minnesota this whole year. But I like to get the real matchups. There's going to be a decent mix of some clips in here. But anyways, I also want to make this clear that clips are clips, and I will be using them to illustrate my points. That does not mean that I am basing my points on these clips. It's supplementary material, not the material itself. I'll also be looking at regular season data, but again, it's supplementary information. And like, I really felt the need to say this watching back these games because people will look you right in the face and talk about how the regular season matchup matters so much, like it's the sole indicator of how a series would go. Meanwhile, in the 2 games that I watched here, Isaiah Hartenstein took a 3-pointer in each of them. And I'm pretty sure I genuinely saw Lou Dort take 12 mid-range jumpers in these 2 games. 12 Lou Dort middies. This shit ain't the same as the playoffs, man. In the regular season, these teams split their 4 matchups. They beat them in full strength on the 31st, but then the Thunder lost to them in a terrible performance from SGA in the middle of February. Then they matched up with them again back-to-back at the end of the month. Minnesota lost that first one, but they won the second game in overtime. In that last game of the 4, OKC held a 16-point lead with under 4 minutes, just under 4 minutes left in the game. They completely blew it at the end because they couldn't hit a three to save their lives. They went 2 for 15 in that fourth quarter. The Wolves played OKC very well during this year's regular season. They, as a team, had a 119.2 offensive rating, which is 2.6 points higher than their regular season average themselves, and 11.7 points better than OKC typically allows. Meanwhile, OKC's offensive rating versus Minnesota was 118.5, which is only slightly lower than Minnesota's versus them, but it's 1.8 points below their regular season average. Now, as for how individuals have performed in the regular season matchup, well, besides for SGA having that one terrible game, it's otherwise been great for him. But J-Dub, on the other hand, has been quite underwhelming, especially from outside, as he shot just 28% versus Minnesota this year and averaged like 52% true shooting, under 20 points per game. Not good. Chet's numbers, they all look fine. He actually shot the three especially well in the he played in 2 games actually, but yeah, either way, he looked really great in the double big lineups with Isaiah Hartenstein, specifically in that February 23rd game, was able to get a decent amount of offense just from not having the defense's focus. But for Minnesota, well, I actually have some bad news. Ant was terrible. Ant was terrible in their regular season matchups. He averaged 22.6 assists to 3.5 turnovers, and he shot 36, 31, 82. That's bad. I don't know if you knew that, but that's bad. Much of this, all of it really, is due to OKC's remarkably intense perimeter defense. On top of the pressure that Ant gets as a ball handler, he also has even more dramatic pressures as a scorer than normal when Julius Randle is only present for one of these games. Though he did have just 2 assists to 3 turnovers in the game that he did play with Julius, so it's not like he was cooking with him there. I made a video about Ant's improved processing, and he pretty much immediately started playing poorly, like 3 straight games of poop out of a butt, but he's been fine since then. However, this OKC defense is the ultimate test for that improved processing. In both of the games that I watched, the signs do not point to a good result for Minnesota. Ant had a lot of sloppy moments in these games. Sometimes he can get away with it against lesser competition, but that's not a mistake you can make against OKC's defense. They own the passing lanes. Oftentimes, they will have defenders whose role is solely on that possession to be ready to pick off the pass. Oftentimes, that player is SGA, and his steal here leads to a 3 for Dort on the other end. Now, as I mentioned, Randle can take some pressure off of him as a scorer, but based on their December matchup, I don't know how well he will play against them either. Something I've mentioned time and time again is about how OKC has their perimeter defense filled with short defenders who play bigger than they are because of strength and length, which is obviously better than short defenders who don't play bigger, but ultimately they are still at a size disadvantage. This is especially key for Randle, who likes to shoot over the defense a lot. And so far in the playoffs, those shots have been nothing but cash money for him. The problem lies in the power that he uses to generate the space to get those shots. A big improvement for Randle is his physicality, which often would come in waves. That has been present all the time, constantly throughout this entire postseason run. He is using that physicality to generate his mid-range shots closer to the rim and while getting more separation off of the bump, because when Randle bumps into you, you're gonna go flying, and now he can just pull up right over you. In his playoff series of the past, he would just kind of take dumb mid-range shots possession to possession, no mind of getting a better shot, regularly taking shots from like 15 to 20 feet, like way too far outside. Much better processing of late, and as a result, he's been getting the best looks of his career in this year's postseason. With all that said, OKC has a lot of guys who will be difficult for Randle to just simply push around. Against either of their bigs, he won't be able to push iHeart around, and Chet, while he's certainly no brick house, he is stronger than he looks, and he's so lengthy that even if he does get bumped off of his spot, he can recover well enough and contest those jumpers because he's got so much damn length. I don't know why I emphasize that so hard. Caruso, J-Dub, and Lou Dort were regularly keeping fucking Nikola Jokic from getting to his spots against them, so Randle, they can handle. Here, Dort uses his lower body strength to keep Julius from getting into that short midi hook shot range. This is a makeable shot for him, but one the defense will live with. It's further out than he'd like like it to be and more contested than he'd like it to be. In the Lakers series, Randall was punishing the smaller players multiple times, not always for layups, but for hooks, floaters, and short mid-range shots. And these kind of shots at that range are much better than what Julius just took there over Dort. He also had his moments bullying fucking Draymond Green, so I have no doubt that he will get OKC smaller defenders on a handful of these possessions, but that doesn't mean that his pace will not slow down, and it doesn't mean that it will not make Minnesota's offense worse. Now, he did find himself with Isaiah Joe and Cason Wallace on him as a mismatch. Those guys are definitely just too small. I have no doubt that he will make quick work of these opportunities, as he did in this game. He also missed a bunny, just easy layup off of an SGA switch, so I can at least give him the credit for getting that shot. But ultimately, OKC was fine, basically just switching, and that helped them way more than it hurt them. The reason a defense chooses to switch heavy goes well beyond the individual matchup and how they're doing as a result of the switch. Because they were willing to switch basically anyone onto Randall, that overall led to an OKC defense that was rarely giving up major mismatches while having the freedom to help as necessary with little consequence. Because of OKC's willingness to switch, guys are able to switch to play help when Randall is near the ball action. Dort and Wiggins here seamlessly switch. This leaves Dante DiVincenzo open in the corner, but Conley isn't spacing it out properly, so it kind of impedes the vision for Ant to that pass. He takes a step back into a midi that would have been pretty damn open, but Wiggins is able to switch and give a great closeout. OKC was also very content leaving Randall wide open, like especially for the regular season. Obviously, we know dudes get left open in the playoffs, but in the regular season, teams tend to try at least for rep's sake, but no, they were leaving his ass wide open and he did not make them pay. He went 1 for 4 from outside. I honestly think with how well he shot the ball in the first 2 rounds, he's going to get more respect than he was getting in this game, weirdly enough. But in this one in particular, he did go 2 for 7 on jump shots, and that is the danger that you play with Randall. He also got a few easy buckets on offensive boards. I'm sure he'll be able to do that a decent bit, less so when Chet is available, but still, Randall has impressed me more than anyone in this year's playoff, so I don't have doubt for him really at all, especially by comparison to what I used to, but I also don't think he's going to feast the same way that he has been to this point. Ultimately, his scoring gravity will be appreciated by Ant. What really concerns me if I'm Minnesota is the overall playmaking of this team as a unit. As I've mentioned, though he did have some concerning plays, I'm not too worried about Ant making the right decisions in this series. Mike Conley also has that on lock. Randall is also a hell of a passer, which is probably the most underrated aspect of his game, but I'm not sure anyone else on this team is going to do an adequate job when they're forced to put the ball on the floor and make quick decisions. OKC's pestering defense makes that kind of hesitation or weakness as a ball handler stick out like a sore thumb. Nickeil Alexander-Walker in this first game was especially bad under pressure, throwing 5 turnovers in 19 minutes. Late in the game off of an inbound, the Thunder don't give him a clear passing lane and he's forced to throw it in, but that gets tipped, and that is the nail in the coffin for the game. But more importantly than that, he got a pair of bad turnovers, like terrible, awful turnovers in the third quarter on plays that were really pivotal in the momentum shifting in that game. Oh, the Thunder were already surging, and they could have used a bucket. I think in one instance, a play was open, and he just miscalculated the pass. One way or the other, they were huge momentum shifting plays, and instead that momentum went to the Thunder. Now, Rudy Gobert in particular, I think will have nightmares about this series by the time it's over. He infamously has a pair of bricks for hands, and any level of fumbling a pass or bringing the ball down low when he doesn't have to will result in turnovers. People act like Gobert gets played off of the floor for defensive reasons, which is extremely silly because he's a massive defensive plus, even with some overblown weaknesses defending the perimeter. What actually gets him played off of the floor is his offense, and while he was better in the Warriors series and he had the game of his life in LA in Game 5, he's still got those brick hands at the end of the day. Some may view his size as an advantage because OKC has very guard-heavy rotations, but just one of their bigs needs to be in the game to negate that advantage. Someone I expect to do well for Minnesota is Naz Reid, who gets the benefit of not being one of the stars in this series, but easily the best all-around scoring role player. So in the class that he's in, he's above the grade across the board, and he has the length to be unbothered by OKC's shorter defenders. Here's the thing for Reed. He's either going to make this shot or he's not, but Alex Caruso's presence, try as he might, almost certainly won't be the reason he makes or misses. I think Chet matches up with him pretty well, but Hart is probably too slow and unwilling to step outside of the paint, and everyone else will barely be registered by Nas when he's pulling up over them. Jalen Williams, Big J Will, actually did a really good job on Nas, but I don't know how many real rotation minutes he's actually going to get. But if I were Chris Finch, I would try and balance my Nas minutes to not overlap with the Chet minutes as much as possible to really maximize his effectiveness. Mike Conley should also be fine. He's too experienced and level-headed to be bothered even by a defense as intense as OKC's. But Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Jaden McDaniels, Dante DiVincenzo, and Rudy Gobert, I have serious concerns for in terms of their ability to handle the ball pressure of OKC. The Thunder will also be taking full advantage of their ability to roam off of McDaniels and Gobert. As long as someone closes enough around the rim, Gobert doesn't have like a huge advantage, and McDaniels, though he has been incredibly impressive in the playoffs overall, he is shooting just 34.5% from three in under 3 3-point attempts per game. To put that lack of three-point frequency into perspective, McDaniels is 32nd in minutes per game on average in the playoffs at this point. Of the 31 guys ranked above him, the only players who took less threes per game, in fact, I think the only players who took less and by a difference of, like, I think the one guy who took more than him but was a little bit less was Josh Hart, who took 4.5. But after that, Alfred Sengun, Ivica Zubac, and Giannis Antetokounmpo are the only players who took less threes per game. Josh Hart is shooting more and on a way better percentage, and his ass is getting left wide open constantly. McDaniels can, of course, counteract this the way that he typically does as a cutter, a slasher, and even a mid-range shooter, but he will be seeing a more impressive backline help defense than in the previous two series, and while his length gives him the advantage on those short mid-range shots that he likes to take, he's also just shooting 40% from 3 to 10 feet, so it's a shot that OKC is going to live with. Being able to play off of a non-shooter can completely break up an offense that is not ready for it, especially if it's a 2 non-shooters on the floor lineup, as would be the case with McDaniels and Gobert. Looking at their February 24th game, Hartenstein here has the Jalen Clark matchup, which he does not give a shit about. SGA is ball watching and allows McDaniels to cut down the middle, but Hart is able to cover the passing lane while still easily rotating over to block Ant's layup. Obviously, Jalen Clark is not going to play real minutes in this series, but I'm just trying to highlight the effect that comes from this roaming. Sub that for Gobert, the effect is all the same. I imagine Chet will get the McDaniels assignment a lot of the time, allowing him to be a free safety, weak side rim protector, as well as yet another option to camp in a passing lane or show to prevent an Anthony Edwards drive. All the while, he has the speed and length to recover on a McDaniels cut or drive. Again, there will be plays where the Thunder get got on this, but OKC is playing the math, and I think that's going to work for them in this case. The way you counteract this is by bringing McDaniels into screen actions in order to force his defender to just stop camping, especially if that defender is a weak point. SGA actually got the McDaniels matchup in these games, but I only think that's because Chet was not here. If that defender is Chet and you're bringing him up into the screen action, well, he has the foot speed. Like, he's not a weak point on the perimeter, and when OKC's running their double big lineups, sure, maybe you can get Chet out of the paint, but you're still going to have Isaiah Hartenstein lurking. Minnesota has navigated all of these spacing issues pretty flawlessly to this point, but they also haven't exactly faced a team built to exploit them to the fullest extent. To be clear, I believe Minnesota is the better shooting team here, but there's just enough holes in that shooting for OKC to make it a big problem all the same. That said, I think Minnesota's offense should be okay versus OKC. Ant's regular season numbers don't concern me too much. I don't want to put a lot of stock in them personally, but I do think the way OKC will be enabled to help and the way in which they will help will devastate their less capable playmakers, and it will give them significant fits. In that December game, the Thunder had a 23-9 turnover advantage, which allowed them to take 10 more shots than Minnesota. OKC has their own offensive issues to address, however. In that Denver Nuggets series, they shot just 32% from outside, and if you remove their dominant Game 2 performance, that number drops to 30. They had games where they shot 12 of 39, 11 of 40, 10 for 41, and 9 for 35. In the fourth quarter of the February game, they went 2 for 15 from outside and blew a 20-point lead as a result. Alex Caruso has stepped up and shot the ball very well for them in the playoffs, but otherwise, it's been disappointment after disappointment when you're looking at their role players to shoot. Dort, I knew would be left open a lot, but wow, did he start to brick to close that Denver series. It is imperative over and over again to acknowledge how much role player shooting will impact this series. SGA has 2 defenders shading him here, and unfortunately, it doesn't result in the best shot. A deep 3 from Dort with a decent late contest from Nickeil Alexander-Walker. He makes it, but this is a shot that Minnesota lives with all day, every day. It's also important that SGA makes these reads correctly, not only making sure he doesn't turn the ball over, but also spotting the opportunities and capitalizing on them as quickly as possible. Like, honestly, just to be a little bit nitpicky, if he got that pass to Dort just a fraction of a second earlier, that shot would have been wide open. It still went in, but we're talking about the process here. Now, at this point, we know what kind of coverage SGA is going to see. He will probably just have limited paint touches. He's going to have the focus of at least 2 defenders at any given point. Same can be said for Anthony Edwards. This is pretty heavily dependent on how much Rudy Gobert plays, though, in terms of the level of rim deterrence. Every time Rudy was out of the game, Shea was vicious on the drive. He sliced through the defense for an and one over Reed in the second, and at the very end of the third, he just gets this one to squeak over the rim. There was honestly a night and day difference between his aggressiveness as a driver, depending on if Gobert was on the floor or not, but he will definitely be getting a defender whose job is to do nothing but stick to him like glue. Nickeil Alexander-Walker even took that to heart for real on this play. Here, he's looking at no one but Shea, focusing solely on not letting him get to the ball, making the Thunder scramble to find a shot. Not looking where the ball is, just where Shea's moving towards. This was actually a zone from Minnesota, which they busted out a few times earlier in the game, and it didn't have a lot of positive results. In fact, I think Hartenstein got like back-to-back lobs out of it at one point. But late in the game, they were making OKC scramble, and a lot of it was due to that zone. Very similar to Minnesota, my fear isn't how their lead guard is going to handle this pressure. Denver was playing insane defense on SGA in round 2, and he still managed to come out of it putting up numbers comparable to his regular season averages. But how OKC's offense got into its flow was dramatically interrupted. That's not because Shea couldn't elevate over the defense or make the right pass. More importantly, it's how everyone else played off of the advantages that he was creating. A lot of the times he would pass it to like J-Dub, for example, and he would not use that advantage properly, resulting in the defense getting set at best and a terrible shot or a turnover at worst. Dub is the player that I am most concerned about in this series. Though he responded to the fraud accusations in Game 7 versus Denver, he's still super duper shaky as a shooter. His playmaking was great throughout the series, but he was so willing to take that pull-up midi that the defense was regularly giving him that it resulted in constantly stagnant offense. Dub had a very good game against Minnesota in December, but it was off of the back of basically nothing but jump shots. Even though he was hitting jumpers in this one, I really hope Dub does not fall into the trap of settling for shots like these. Whether he's making them or not, the D is happy for this to be the result of your processing. He's far too eager to bail the defense out here, as he was in that Denver series. If he's gonna be a high-volume mid-range guy, which he's good enough at for that to be acceptable, at the very least, he needs to clean up the quality of those attempts, and there were a lot of ugly ones in that Denver series that I'm just not trying to see repeated. Chet has shot the ball terribly, but he's been great inside the arc, and he's historically a strong shooter, so I feel like just law of averages and all, it's pretty much guaranteed to flip at least a little bit. As for the other guys, like I said, they have to hit their threes. Isaiah Joe needs to be a good enough defender to maximize the value of his shooting so he can like play big minutes. I've loved what I've seen from Case and Wallace to close for Denver versus Denver Denver, so I feel good about him, even if his three is whatever. Hartenstein actually weirdly feasted in this December game because both his floater and playmaking was working for him really well. Against Gobert, he actually got quite a few backdoor passes off to go his way. He had 4 assists in that one because Rudy just wasn't in a full, like, bona fide drop, not like right under the basket, because he was genuinely fearful of that Hartenstein floater. As a result, Gobert was just a foot further away from the basket than he would usually be, and Cutters had a clear lane, and Hart is a phenomenal short roll passer, so he usually made the right read. Because they got burned by this a few times, Gobert started focusing on stopping that from happening and allowing the floater, so that freed up Hart to start scoring the ball. See, kids, the relationship between scoring and playmaking is ever present, even when it comes to your role players. Play him for the floater and he'll kill you with the pass. Play him for the pass and he'll kill you with the floater. That's basketball. When it comes to mismatch hunting, they have the Randall option theoretically, but that hasn't been a mismatch for anyone so far. And I actually felt like he did a great job in this first game, especially when switched on to SGA and Dub on drives. I think he made both of them miss a layup, and I also think he made both of them pass out of a drive once or twice as well. Mike Conley, of course, will be getting hunted by OKC's big ball handlers. SGA and Dub are both terrible matchups for him. This double screen set by OKC allows Shea to easily manipulate his way to his spot at the free throw line, and that shot's as close to a layup for him as a mid-range shot could be. However, I feel like Conley's not exactly been easy pickings at all at this point. I feel like Minnesota has done some of what New York's done with Brunson to hide him, like they did versus Boston, like just having him pressure up high and then reconfiguring your backline help before the advantage is created. Maybe you do allow some pull-up threes in the process, as the Knicks did, but that's a result you're very happy with, especially because SGA has been fucking terrible on his pull-up threes in the playoffs so far, and J-Dub is certainly not good at them either. So that could be really a smart idea. A real mismatch hunting question that I cannot wait to see answered is how will Rudy Gobert do on a switch, because he did a great job against Luka on switches in round 1, but that was largely due to Luka's slow play style. As long as Rudy doesn't fall for Luka's tricks, he's going to be able to keep up with him in terms of just raw speed, and he was also pretty good against Jimmy Butler when he got that switch in round 2, because of course Jimmy Butler can't shoot. Gobert would just sag off and let him do what he wanted as long as it wasn't in the paint. But Shea is different. You can still feel good baiting him into pull-up threes, but if he's getting that pull-up from mid-range, well, like I said, that shot's as close to a layup for him as it could be. And he has a huge speed advantage on Gobert, one that Minnesota hasn't really had to deal with in the Rudy Gobert era. Luka was crafty, not quick. Jamal was pretty quick, but not that great of a player overall to take advantage of it. And Kevin Durant nor Devin Booker used a mismatch for more than a mid-range pull-up. I previously mentioned the context of the last 2 rounds. Austin Reeves also sucked butt, so he wasn't really doing it. This is the first guy who can really cook Rudy Gobert on the perimeter. And that is exceptionally important for OKC to take full advantage of, because otherwise Rudy will get the offense for OKC to grind to a dead stop. Whoever Gobert's man is needs to be used as a screener / handoff guy to hopefully pull him out of the paint, because whether it's Dort, Caruso, Wiggins, or Dub, Rudy will likely be getting that matchup, and he will likely not even acknowledge those guys exist unless they drive into the paint. Sure, someone could have a Game 7 Terrence Mann type of performance and punish Minnesota for it that way, but in terms of consistently getting the defense in rotation, they need to involve Gobert in a switch and a screen action as much as possible, and SGA needs to be a killer on that switch as consistently as possible. This might be the longest series preview I've ever written, and I skipped the history stuff, so that's saying a lot, so drop a like for me, please. But what is my final verdict? Well, I'm going to go Thunder in 6. Closer to 7 than 5. I, once again, just like that Denver series, I think OKC is great, but they're not infallible. Betting against Minnesota has proved dangerous for the past 2 years in a row in the playoffs, but I remain confident that OKC is the best team in the league. I think this is going to be a dogfight one way or the other. Minnesota has a great defense, and they're prone to having games with massively stagnant offense and bad shooting, but the same thing can be said for OKC. Honestly, I feel great about both teams' defenses. I feel bad about both of their offenses. I honestly don't feel substantially better than one or the other about the offenses. So it kind of just comes down to the defense. And Minnesota's got a great defense. I think OKC has one of the best we've ever seen. And that will be the deciding factor. There's going to be a lot of very poor shooting games in this one. And I personally love that. Like, I think it's a great basketball product. I have loved the playoff combination lately of modern principles, but also older school physicality being allowed and all of that. I just think the playoffs have been a great product, and I think this series is going to be amazing too. But as far as who wins, I think OKC is the better defense, and I think they can handle the pressures of Minnesota's defense just a little bit better than Minnesota will handle their defense. So yes, Thunder in 6 is my official prediction. It can go either way, though, and I'm excited to see the results. Let me know what you think. Criticisms, extra commentary, I welcome it. I appreciate it. Just be nice about it. But yeah, that's it. Goodbye.